Okay, the anime reaction? Anyone? Frieren? Do we want to watch some more Frieren? Hi, hello. It's been a second. For those, I know a lot of people sort of frustrated that I don't upload these more frequently, and like, yeah, it is what it is. I'm sorry. These reactions do kind of have to be my lowest priority stuff that I do, because like I have to do other stuff that, you know, pays the rent. Which is trying to work on the essays over on my main channel and like the shorts for the shorts channel and stuff like that. That's the work that I've sort of been trying to focus on doing. Also around the house, I had to put up like a net over my office window because the cats kept trying to escape out of it. And that took like a hot second to, first of all, find some netting that would actually fit. The whole thing. And we gotta deal with the fucking garden box. Like, we've got some boxes out on the porch of the thing with plants in it, and they need to be cleaned up at some point, and I need to clean up the damn thing, and keeping the house clean is also, you know, it's... I've just gotten back recently on my ADHD medication, and it's been helping me a lot, and one of the ways it's been helping me is that I've been able to, you know, get shit done that I've left for way too long. And one of the things I haven't been doing is my avoidance and sort of coping strategies, which is watching a bunch of anime, right? So there's that. Like, so sorry, there's not going to be a schedule for this. It's not going to be particularly consistent. I'm still going to watch Frieren. I'm not abandoning it, but this is just the way it is. Anyway, welcome to an anime reaction. The way that these work is that up at the top of the screen, you have got yourself a little bit of a slice of the lower part of whatever we're watching, which will show you the subtitles. That's what that's calculated for. And in the top left, you've got a timer, which tells you how long I've been watching this particular episode. And you will use those while you have the episode up on your own screen to keep in time with me, because then I'll do essentially like a commentary track and react to things and talk about them as they happen, and then you're watching it on your own, and that way I get to avoid having copyright claims like shoved down the throat of my entire channel, which I would like to avoid. Thank you, please. This channel has already been completely deleted once. I don't want to have it happen again. That's how that works. Every once in a while, I'll have more to say than just stuff I can sort of comment while it's happening, and I'll go 3, 2, 1, pause, and we'll pause at the same time. I will do my talking. Maybe I'll scroll back and forth a little bit between things, but you will use the timer and what's on screen to sort of try and keep in time with me, and eventually I'll say, okay, let's get back to it. 3, 2, 1, go, and then we'll go both together, right? That's the way that this works. It's clunky, it's impractical, but it means I don't have to like edit a bunch of stuff and avoid copyright claims and all that nonsense, because like it's like I already have way too much work on my plate, so I don't want to add more to it. So that's how this works. So let's watch episode 10 and see Frieren absolutely kick the ass of poor Aura, I assume. 3, 2, 1, go. Trees. This will be a flashback then. Mm-hmm. Again, the demon thing, right? Like, I'm wondering if the show is going to deepen them out into character, like into people, like that the demons are actually, that there is a person in there, and one that can, and perhaps, you know, if you have compassion in your heart, you should attempt to understand. Or if it's gonna stay with, no, these are fantasy monsters. These are not human people. They are They are ghosts, they are spirits, they are something evil that takes the shape of a human being in order to do evil, but they are not like people underneath it all. I think I've talked enough about like the problematic ways in which that can be coded. Because it's a thing of like, imagine if the demons were like, oh, they are nomadic people who travel from place to place in caravans, and you kind of like, oh, like that. You can very, very quickly run into problems with coding any kind of creature that looks human as evil, in like inherently like irredeemably, completely, totally evil. That's it can get real bad real fast, right? So I do wonder like how Frieren is going to step across that line, right? Like, it's like gonna manage the difficulties of that, because it is difficult. Like, it's not impossible, but it's hard. Okay, back to Aura. It's just okay. 3, 2, 1, pause. Let me just. I'm sorry. I laughed just because it really is like someone just like went into paint, into like Windows Paint, and just like deleted. It's like select and hit delete, and just poof, gone. I kind of do feel like. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on the level of gore that they're willing to show, but it really sort of does feel like there should be like bits of flesh and bits of his body sort of still visible, torn apart in here. But that might be literally just like a ratings issue of thing of like, oh, we can show the blood, but we can't show like the blood pulsing out of a vein or whatever. Who knows? Okay. Still rocking that gorgeous Bishi look, though. Like, never dropping that mask. Anyway. 3, 2, 1, go. Maybe because you have a hole in your chest? Oh, they're hiding their power levels? Like, literally? Blast. Cold. Okay. 3, 2, 1, pause. I'm interested in that. Because those are barrows that they're living in. It's like, she's like, is in. I'm thinking about this in terms of the environment design here. This is like the distant 1,000-year past, whatever, long time ago. Also, it's elves, which, okay. But these are barrows. Like, these are, because in Norse mythology, right? Like, which is something that Tolkien, who's like when you see most elves in most things most of the time, you get Tolkien elves, right? Like, that's the kind of elf that fantasy has sort of adapted and adopted as its default setting, right? Which is tall, sort of impossibly beautiful, ethereal, eternal, like the sort of like impossibly beautiful, long-lived, often emotionally distant from humanity, which is like, that's a thing we see with Frieren. That's all very Tolkien, right? But in Norse mythology, elves are something, well, it's not hard to say that they're any one thing, really, because, like, you get different elves in Finland than you do in Norway, than you do in Denmark, than you do in Germany. But the classic category of elves are elves who live under the hills in the woods. Like, they tend to occupy mountain halls sometimes. Like, they live inside of mountains, they live inside of hills in the woods. And certainly in Denmark, where I live, the myth of elves is one of an elf king who will have this enormous court made up of his impossibly beautiful daughters, just like astonishingly madly gorgeous daughters. And like, you'll hear their parties at night if you're wandering out in the woods, and if you get taken in by it, if you follow the music, you will see these impossibly beautiful elf daughters who will encourage you and beckon you to come with them down into the halls under the hills to dance and dance and dance and dance and dance. And you will not be able to stop dancing. They will dance until you die of exhaustion, and then they'll eat you. And the thing about that, and these are the sorts of barrows, these are the sorts of hills that you would see featured in like illustrations and depictions of that kind of elf, like this, like these hills in the woods with like openings in them, like that lead into the dark. So that's interesting to see Frieren sort of using that for their elves. Like, clearly these are not those kinds of elves, for one thing, because they have backs. That's the other thing about Norse elves, is that those beautiful elf daughters, yeah, if you pay attention, you will notice that they are incredibly beautiful, but they are always facing you. Like, they will never turn their back on you, ever. Because if they did, you would be able to see into their backs that they are hollow, and inside of them are nothing but rotting meat filled with maggots and flies. That's the fairy tale story of, like, you shouldn't judge things by their beautiful appearance, like, because they can be rotten inside and hollow back. Right? That's a sort of classic fairy tale thing about them. That's clearly not what the elves are going for here, but it sort of leads me to wonder, because, like, a lot of, like, because we have in Frieren, from the German names to like a bunch of the architecture to this thing, we have a lot of sort of Germanic Norse influence on the thing, and then also Greek, weirdly, which, like, that's all part of the sort of big pan-European sort of exoticized version of medieval ancient Europe that sort of exists in the fantasy genre, especially in high fantasy stuff from Japan. Like, high fantasy stuff from Japan will often just, like, wildly mix and match, like, details of, like, you'll have a fucking Renaissance like a sort of like Louis VII fucking Versailles court in one scene, and then in the other they'll be walking through, like, the fucking Parthenon, right? Like, just like, yeah, sure, this is all stuff that exists in the same country and the same culture. Like, all the ancient temples are, like, ancient Greek-style temples. And all the evil demon lord castles are, like, fucking Baroque castles. Or Gothic castles from Germany. But it sort of... there seems to be a relatively consistent approach to taking a bunch of stuff from Germanic mythology, and from sort of Germanic, Scandinavian-esque visions of sort of high fantasy. I'm wondering how much of that is going to be there. Is it just an aesthetic thing that they've sort of layered over top of what's a fairly conventional fantasy story, or are they actually going to engage more deeply with, because like there's fucking dwarves and elves, right? Like, and they are not the versions of elves and dwarves that you would see in Norse mythology, is the thing. Again, with dwarves, because dwarves are, in Norse mythology, are sort of, kind of, more or less a kind of elf. Like, they are sort of, kind of part of the fair folk. You'll hear them called Svartelfa, which means dark dwarves or black dwarves, because they live in the earth, and they, like, run great forges, and they make beautiful things, but they are, like, a kind of elf, right? Because that's all sort of categorized under the category of, like, fair folk, fey folk, sort of thing. Anyway, I may be back on my medication, but like my fucking yapping hasn't stopped, so that's good. Guess the medication isn't affecting me too deeply. Okay, let's get back to the thing. Anyway, all of these things all these questions I just asked, they are rhetorical questions. I don't want you to spoil it for me in the comments. I'm asking these things out loud to myself, going, oh, okay, like, is this gonna, that's interesting. I'm hyping myself up for possibilities, is what I'm doing. 3, 2, 1, go. Oh, that... Jesus, that's how they met? I like her practicality. Oh, don't mince words or anything. Huh. Three, two, one. Pause. Character design time again, a little bit. Cause there's an interesting thing happening here with the design of the demons. Because, like, the demons we've seen so far in the modern day, right? Like, even including the dude that Frieren sealed away, I think, and killed later, they've all been showing their faces. Like, they've all been very like, hello, hi, we're wearing clothes, we're civilized, yes, please let us in. Let us in. We're very nice, we won't kill everyone and devour their corpses, we promise. They've all been civilized in that sense, right? Like, they've all been, like, sort of wearing clothes, like, they've been decorating themselves also is the other thing. Like, they're not just wearing, like, rags or whatever, they're wearing fancy clothes, fine clothes. That goes for Aura, that goes for whatever the other two who just got killed. I don't remember their names anymore. They're irrelevant now, they're dead. They're all wearing fancy clothes, and these characters are not. These characters instead are dressing up, like, in sort of scary knight armor, like letting their horns poke out. So, like, still, there's clearly still individuality between them, right? But they're covering up, they're hiding themselves, they're wearing, like, scary armor. Again, I'm wondering on a character design level, like, is that, like, again, that's that thing about the demons. Does this signal that the demons are changing in their approach to, like, culture? Like, that they have aesthetic preferences, that they can develop, like, personalities that exist, like, beyond just their need to kill? Does it say something about a change in the demons themselves or merely a change in tactics, right? That they're dressing up like this because that makes the humans scared or whatever, and that gives them an advantage in battle. And they're dressing up in sort of like nice clothes when they're trying to invade the city with the barrier around it because of that's the way that you like sort of they probably would have been more hostile if we showed it up in armor. Like, is it merely utilitarianism? Because again, that would support the whole like demons are soulless creatures who do not do anything, say anything, or behave in any way except as a means to harm humans. It's like we wear fancy clothes because humans let their guards down around fancy clothes for the same reason that they say fancy words, right? That's interesting to me. Like that the demons in the past are shown to have like a distinctly much more sort of warlike aesthetic to them, and the demons now have much more of a air quote, like big air quotes against civilized aesthetic in the sense of being civil, right? Like in the sense of being sort of polite, in the sense of engaging with culture. Interesting idea. Wonder if anything will come of it. 3, 2, 1, go. We're gonna get the demonstration now of the nice. I like the briefness of that. That is just like pow, goodbye. Why? That just seems very sensible to me. What do you mean cowardly? No, it's not. I really liked that it was just like a brief flash, right? Again, the Greek thing. Forever. Hmm. Hmm. It does rob the scene of a little bit of attention. 3, 2, 1, pause. Because, like, here the tension is, right? Like, the ostensible tension is she has these scales. They are like an instant win button against anything that has less mana than her, right? So the tension is like, fuck, like, have demons progressed so far that now they have more mana than Frieren does? And, like, anyone who's sensible, like, who knows the tropes, like, obviously is going to turn out Frieren has more magic. Obviously turns out, like, she has some way to, like, of course Frieren is going to win. That is never intention, right? But it does, like, when we have these flashbacks, they're sort of like, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to have a special technique that causes you to seem like you have way less mana than you actually do, but in reality, you actually have a huge amount of mana. Like, unless they're pulling some kind of Uno reverse card on me where they're setting all of that up as a red herring and then revealing, no, Aura actually does have more mana than Frieren, but Frieren just cheats, right? Like, she just has a way to cheat her way around it because it's about deception rather than necessarily overpowering your enemies. If it is going to be a thing of Frieren just revealing that she has way more mana than Aura thinks, and that's how she wins, then the tension of the scene has kind of dropped out of it because we're just waiting for it to go through the motions rather than being excited to see how she solves it, right? So I kind of want Aura to actually have more mana than Frieren, but Frieren just, like, she cheats. Like, she finds some dishonorable, cheating, lying, scheming way to beat the demon because, you know, at the end of a fight, whoever's standing is the winner, right? I wonder about that. Let's see, because if it's... Otherwise, I would have held these fucking flashbacks for later. I would have held them for, like, a dramatic moment when it seems like Frieren has lost, and then pull them out as a way to explain how she's about to turn things around, or until after she has won, and then kicked in the flashbacks to show how she did it. To sort of maintain the dramatic tension of the scene. It's a little odd sort of putting them at the front of that and sort of zapping the whole thing if you're not doing some kind of red herring. Like, if they're not about to... We all sitting here thinking, oh, it's because Frieren has the mana control technique. That's how she's going to win. And she wins in a completely different way. I don't know. Let's find out. 3, 2, 1, go. But not for an elf. What was that word? Auslöse. Parthenon. Hierarchy. Yeah. Character design. Man, again. 3, 2, 1, pause. But I like this shot of, like, Frieren walking on a raised surface so she can be, like, eye to eye with Flamme. It's also it's sort I don't know how much to read into it, but it sort of ties in with the theme of deception, right? Like Frieren is making herself seem taller than she is. But also I just wanted to comment on it a little bit, but like the background work in this fucking series is still, again, it's so funny that we're fully in Greece here. Like, this is fully like on some extremely Mediterranean bullshit when the entire rest of the series is set in like fucking Northern Europe. It's one of the funny things about like watching certain kinds of fantasy when you like. I did 3 years of history at university. I'm not like a fucking historical architecture expert or anything, but like, it is funny, like, just like, yeah, sure. And like, maybe it is, like, maybe this is a more southern part. Like, maybe Flamand, that her thing, like, that's more sort of down near, like, in a more southern region near some coastline, sort of similar to where, like, Italy and like Turkey, Greece, those places would be. It's just like, it's just funny, like that like the vision of the ancient fantasy past, like the really long ago, far away ancient fantasy past is like, oh yes, it's ancient Greek with heroes, Heracles, oh yes, togas, oh, and then the current day, as it were, fantasy vision is much more like Game of Thrones, much more like, oh yeah, we're Northern Europe, we're like rough walls and like thatched roofs and like bindingsværk, who was as they're called in Danish. That's just kind of funny to me. It's not a criticism, just an observation. But again, the background work, like, this is presumably just gonna be for this fucking flashback, right? And yet, like, some really pretty, very detailed background work. Like, it's definitely not like movie level quality. It's more like an OVA quality. Like the way that OVAs used to have higher budgets. But like, look at that fucking cart of just like fruit or whatever. Like, hand painted that shit. That's some gorgeous texturing on it also. Maybe they overpainted it a little bit. Like, maybe it's a little over rendered, especially relative to how little rendering there is on the character, but still. Like, that looks like a delicious fucking apple right there. And then, this shot. Look at it, look at the fucking texturing on the rock here. Like, look how much fucking effort went into producing this one shot, the vast majority of which is just gonna get hidden under like a Gaussian blur or like a camera blur. Never to be seen, but like fucking like the stippling and the little, like, there's an artist who put a bunch of effort into like not just drawing like, oh yeah, here's a line and then we just draw lines down and there you go, there's bricks, but like, this looks like individual fucking bricks that have been laid with like mortar and that weren't cut perfectly and they look different from each other and they have wear and tear on them. Like, here's one with this like a missing flagstone in the road. It's like, fuck me, man. Like, someone went to great lengths to make this place look like people have been walking on it for 500 years. That's just impressive. Anyway, 3, 2, 1, go. That shot too. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. Three, 2, 1, pause. Okay. So that's thematically interesting, right? Like, the demons have, like, they they form the barest minimum level of society that is necessary in order for them to like prosecute campaigns of extermination of humans, right? And that those societies are based entirely upon just pure hierarchy, like just pure might makes right. I'm the strongest, I get to be in charge, right? Like fully just that's the whole of their entire social structure. And they draw the parallel between that and like, well, human beings do the same thing. They do the same thing with class. They do the same thing with culture. They do the same thing in many places. They do it with race, like in the real world, where like we establish these constant hierarchies by which to sort ourselves relative to one another, which are stupid, by the way. We should get rid of those. They're bad and they hurt people. But like it draws the comparison that humans do that, but then it makes the observation that demons literally cannot not do that, right? Like that's a part of their demonic nature, is that they are tied to these hierarchies and they cannot function without them, right? Like that's why they cannot even voluntarily really opt to hide their mana in the way that Frieren is capable of doing, and the way humans indeed are capable of doing, because their entire their place in the hierarchy is the only thing that matters to them, right? Because like that, again, like in terms of everything is made with coding, right? Like all character design, all storytelling comes with coding. It is just sort of, it's built in to the way that we tell stories, right? So like the Empire in Star Wars are coded after the Nazis, right? Like that's because they emulate like the aesthetics of like hyper-militarized, like extremely rigid, repressive regimes, and like the ways that they see themselves. And like one of the ways that one of the things George Lucas did very, very, very deliberately was pattern the Empire off of the aesthetic of the Nazis, right? Because that was a visual coding that communicated to the audience how they should relate to the Empire as a thing. Whereas the Rebels, when you look at those, like they like are much more diverse and varied and individualistic and different from one another. Whereas the Empire represents conformity. It represents like this like strict power hierarchy thing. Like all visual design comes with coding, right? Like it's inevitable. It's just a thing of like, even if you try really, really hard to make something that doesn't look like anything else, the audience will see it and go, oh, hey, that kind of looks like that other thing. And boom, now you have coding. Like now the audience understands your thing through the lens of something you didn't intend. And now you've lost control over what your story is actually saying. So it's a thing of like, if you don't code things deliberately in your character design process, your audience will do it for you, and they will come to some answers that you might not like, right? Or that you might not want, or that you might not intend, and then all of a sudden your story means things that you don't want it to mean, and that's bad. Right, and so coding happens on basically every level. It's the simple visual level, it's the like thematic level, it's the like broad narrative metatextual level. Like there's coding happening on all levels of every story that has ever been published, like down to children's books, right? It's not something you have to care about. It's not something where like that determines the quality of a story or whatever. It's just a feature, in the same way that like all of the laws of physics applies to every single object in the world, right? Like, but you don't need to know all the laws of physics in order to have fun throwing a ball around. And so the coding here, like, is that the demons are hyper authoritarians, and they are hyper, like, as is pointed out, like they're hyper individualistic. They only form hierarchies of domination, right? Like they only form hierarchies of, I'm stronger than you, therefore you will do what I say, right? Therefore I control you, I own you, I determine what you get to do, how you get, like, what you get to spend your life doing. And the coding of that, like, that maps onto like a lot of things. Like there's a lot of things that are organized in these hierarchies. Capitalism, for example, is organized in these hierarchies, which is to say, if I own you, if I own something, then I get to determine how it is disposed of, right? Like, and in the extreme consequence of that, well, that's when you get that's when you get the slave trade, where humans are where people are treated as objects that can be traded and bought, right? The less extreme case of that is fucking like Amazon saying, well, the workers who work for us cannot go to the bathroom. They have to piss in bottles or whatever, and like destroy their bodies and their backs working on our fulfillment warehouses under our conditions, because we own them, and we own the warehouses, and we own like, and same thing with like, so capitalism has these systems of hierarchies. Fascism also loves these systems of hierarchies. Like, sort of depending on the political definition you go by, you can sort of like, you can boil fascism down to essentially like a a constantly refining power hierarchy, a pyramid where the top grows ever more and more narrow forever until one person sits on top. That's the social structure that that fascist modes of thought impose on society. Conservatism has it as well. Liberalism has a tendency towards it as well. There are very few like fully radically egalitarian political movements. Like anarchism tries, communism tries. We can argue over how successful actual efforts to implement them have been. We can argue for a long time. It's like 90% of being a leftist is arguing over that. But so the coding there is interesting. That like the demons here represent like not specifically fascism, not specifically capitalism, but they represent that mode of thinking, that strictly hierarchical might makes right. Like the only thing that matters is who has the strength to do things. And the reason I think about that is because it reminds me of what is it called? The Melian dialogue, I think it's called, which is a thing out of the classics. Let me just Google it so that I'm not so I'm not just making up. It's let's see, the dialogue. Yeah, it's from the history of the Peloponnesian War by a historian called Thucydides. I don't know how the fuck to pronounce that name, but basically, it is the Athenians are at war with the Melians, right? And they offer the Melians an ultimatum: surrender and pay tribute to Athens or be destroyed, right? And the Athenians don't want to waste time. They don't want to argue over it. Like, they don't want to have a moral argument over whether what they are doing is right or not. They won't accept a moral argument that they are doing the wrong thing, or that they don't have the right to do what they're doing, or that, like, their own laws sort of preclude them from behaving in this way. So what the Athenian ambassador says is the strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. Right? That's the Melian dialogue, and it's sort of like that's an expression of this particular worldview that's again present in ancient Greece, which again is why I'm thinking, oh, like this whole thing's coded after ancient Greece. Are we sort of engaging with that particular part of Realpolitik? Like, of like it's the story of Frieren actually going to engage with this concept of like the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must, right? Like, because that's what it seems like the demons represent, is that sort of Melian dialogue worldview, that point, that like that particular view of the world. I'd be curious about that, because much is made of how strong Frieren and Stark and Fern are. But like, is the story going to engage with the morality of that? Is it like, does the story have a moral argument about what the purpose of strength is, and like whether strength is alone is enough to justify a person like that? I'm curious about that, because specifically because Himmel seems like such a rebuttal to that. Because Himmel is strong, like Himmel is incredibly powerful, but that's not what made him the hero. Right? Ultimately, like that's not what makes him important. That's not what makes him worthwhile or valuable or good. And the question is, like, is the story going to engage with the concept of like, what would Frieren be worth if she wasn't strong, right? Like, what would Stark be worth? What would Fern be worth if they didn't have their power? Interesting thematic questions all, at least to me, maybe not so much to you, but you know, you came here for the rambling, so that's what you're gonna get. Anyway, 3, 2, 1, go. Wait, hang on. 3, 2, 1, pause. Sorry. I accidentally played all of that anime on screen there, didn't I? I think maybe I did. That's not so good. I'll have to edit that out. But it was another thing I was thinking about. Like, I can't believe it took me this fucking long to notice it, but the earring. The fucking earring. Frieren doesn't have her earrings, but because it's on Flamme, it's her earring. And on the collar around her neck, it's her things, and then Frieren is wearing them because that's good character design detail. A little sort of signifier of their relationship, and Frieren carrying on Flamme's legacy. That's good. Cannot believe I did not notice it until now, but yes, okay, yeah. Sometimes I am slightly insightful. Sometimes I am fucking blind. Anyway, 3, 2, 1, go. That's the other thing, like the significance of spells, because Frieren. Because, like, Frieren collects these useless spells, right? Like, these weird little magic spells, utility spells, like, odd little incantations, which are not powerful. Which do not have particular strength, or, like, great merit, or, like, astonishing effects, or whatever. Which, again, is that thing about, like, how much does this thing engage with, like, the merits of power, like, the purpose of something like magic. Because to demons, the purpose of magic is kill people, right? Like, who is strongest, who gets to determine, like, where and when we kill. Or Totoro style. Oh, I like that a lot. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that rules. Again, ancient Greece just went away. Like, that's why I like that Frieren collects useless magic, right? And values it. Just a feeling? Yeah! Call back! I like that. That's good structure. That's good story structure. Alzalisa. Okay, but you're not gonna... You thought you could hide from me. I'm just gonna take the risk of playing back a little bit of it. Because I want to see those frames that you flashed by me on screen. You thought you could hide them from me? You cannot hide them from me. I'm gonna see them, even if I have to frame by frame my way through this very slowly. Fighting a red dragon? Oh, it's the guy. The demon mage guy. The one they sealed away because they couldn't kill him right then. Oh, yeah. It's Aura getting her shit rocked. Standing at the precipice of the demon castle. The castle itself. Like, again, this fucking gothic Castlevania ass. Flying buttresses ass. German ass castle. Yeah, I just wanted to see those. 3, 2, 1, go. Auslese. What is that? Unleash? Something like that? Ause. Because that's out something, and lese is to let or allow. Again, the tension is kind of not there right now, because we're just waiting for her to get rocked. Do you now? You really are kind of stupid, Aura. Come on. Come on. Give us the thing. Give it to us. Yes. Yeah! Oh, that's pretty. Cold. 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 Jesus. Yep, that was cold. Again, the tension wasn't there because we already knew exactly how she was going to win. Which I don't know about that for structure. It robs it of a little bit of the excitement, right? Like, but the payoff was good. Specifically, the payoff being that That's a pretty good payoff. Like, it's a visceral sort of like it's this thing of like, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Like the unveiling of the power, right? That is definitely a satisfying moment. And this is one thing like, this is something like Frieren sort of shares in common with isekai, right? Specifically in terms of the way that it handles like the power of their protagonists, right? The sort of basic story of Frieren is that she has already beat the final boss, right? Like, it's like she's beaten the Demon Lord, right? Like, she has already done all of the shit. She's been through the adventure, and now she is the OP isekai protagonist level magic power, right? Without being an isekai. Like, it's not an isekai, but it has that element in common of like how it handles how powerful the characters are. That's part of the purpose of Fern and Stark as parts of the story, is that they are characters like, okay, they're strong, clearly. Like, we've seen that like Stark's weakness is primarily that he won't commit. And he keeps getting himself hurt because he's running away rather than like facing things head on. And we've seen that Fern like is an exceptionally powerful mage, but they're also both vulnerable, right? Like, these are two people who, when they get into a fight with something powerful, they are in danger. Like, they could get killed, right? Like, that's part of their purpose in the narrative, is so that it's not just Frieren raffle stomping absolutely over everyone who dares to get in her way, right? And also to avoid having to have villains who are like, wait, why is this motherfucker like apparently like even more powerful than the greatest generals of the Demon King from all that time ago? It sort of avoids the power escalation going too far beyond the thing, because it means Stark and Fern can have foes that have like reasonable power levels without breaking the world immediately. And then we can have Frieren, who's like the OP I win card. Although the story is doing a good job of sort of managing as like, no, Aura could probably have given her a lot of trouble if she had just like not been a moron, if she had just used her army of immortal soldiers to sort of force Frieren to deplete her power, rather than just looking at her and going, oh, low mana, fight, cool, like, use the I win button that I think is going to work. I do like Frieren is still vulnerable, but she has like, it is that story structure problem that you have when you have an extremely powerful central character. What do you do to inject tension into the combat scenes, into battle challenges, into enemies that challenge them? Well, what Frieren does is, first of all, Stark and Fern are there to be sort of recipients of the tension, where like much like with Superman, right? The tension is not so much like, is Frieren more powerful than whatever she's facing right now? The tension is more, can she defeat the enemy while also keeping her apprentice safe, right? Like, that's sort of more where the tension is probably going to be. But another way to do the tension is to withhold from the audience an understanding of exactly how powerful the protagonist is, right? Like, to maintain the mystery that, like, yeah, they're pretty powerful, but maybe there's a limit somewhere. Like, maybe we just haven't seen the limit of just how powerful Frieren is. And that's where, like, in terms of story structure, I would have held the reveal about the mana suppression for much later. I wouldn't even have teased it with Fern. Like, I wouldn't even have Luga sort of figure it out and sort of like clue the audience in. I would just have held it and then like pulled it out of the thing like near the end, after sort of teasing the idea that maybe Frieren has bitten off more than she could chew. Because that would have maintained the tension in the scene, rather than just, because I was like, I will say, for much of the scene with Aura here, it's like, I know what's going to happen. Like, I know what's going to happen. You've already told me what's going to happen. The story has spent, like, the entire episode has basically been about telling me exactly what's going to happen here. And so seeing it play out, and it's taking its time, and she's walking over slowly, and it's like, and Frieren is, like, slowly explaining, like, it would be very nice of you to not use your immortal army on me, actually, because now I've won. Wait, how could you possibly have won? Well, because of, you've thought my mana was low. Well, your mana is like, instead of having that whole back and forth thing, I'm just sitting there kind of going, I know what's going to happen. Give it to me. Just fucking get there. And that's like, if the structure had been a little different, I feel like I would have been a lot more hype here at the end. I will say, real cold of Frieren. Like, she could just have walked up and cast like a kill spell in her face or whatever, but just like kill yourself, and she has no choice but to do it. Like, geez, that's Frieren. That's cold. Which again, good thing that demons are inherently ontologically evil and can't be good and aren't people, because otherwise that would be a remarkably cruel thing for our protagonist to have done. Which, yeah, again, I keep I really do keep coming back to that as a central thing with the demons. Is like, I think the story needs to resist the urge to ever humanize them. Because if it ever does humanize them and kind of go, no, actually, they could be people, it's just there needs to be a layer of interpretation, accommodation, negotiation, wherein a state of peace could exist, of coexistence. That's sort of like, oh, well, if these are actually people, then... Okay, I mean, Frieren will probably have to reckon with what she's done to some of them. Right, which is the... I wonder. We'll see. We'll see. That was episode 10. I liked episode 10. I have liked all of the episodes so far. Quite a lot. This episode didn't drive me insane quite as much as other ones have, but I will say it's also partly because I'm sort of getting accustomed to Frieren's level of production quality right now. There was one shot of, like, grass. Beautiful grass. I think it's after... And also, like, again, the fucking interiors, man. Like Flamme's little hut here. Just like presumably it's not hand painted, like it's not they've not actually been painting like with watercolors and oil and like gouache or whatever the hell they might have been using. Presumably it's digitally painted, but like the rendering and the texturing on it is like genuinely, like, so tactile, so satisfying. Because that's one thing about a lot of seasonal anime. Like, I think especially of My Hero Academia. It's something I've talked about before, I think. My Hero Academia has absolute shit-ass backgrounds. Like, most of the time, its backgrounds, especially its interiors, are just... Fuck, they're ugly. Like, there's such nothing spaces, right? And that's kind of okay for that show, because that show isn't about interiors. It's not like Frieren is much more about like being in the world and like existing in the world with the characters and feeling the tactility of it. So it makes sense that more time is spent on the background. But for something about My Hero Academia, which is all about characters like bouncing their personalities and superpowers off of each other like rapidly, yeah, backgrounds are less, like, you don't have to worry about them so much. But like some of the fucking interiors in My Hero Academia, especially like the early few cores of it, God, just the most miserable shit-ass garbage interiors ever. And that's something that's true of the manga as well. Like, the manga is not... Again, I haven't actually read My Hero Academia since... Yeah, since they raided the mafia base with the girl who can do the healing thing. That was sort of where I fell off of it, because I felt like that whole arc was so perfunctory. Like, it didn't really do anything. But the interiors in the manga also were... The backgrounds, the environment design in that was also often not really that good. So the anime sort of inherited that, I suppose. But Frieren is, like, consistently just... The level of attention it pays to vibe, feeling, the tactility, the texturing of an environment. Like, even in a scene like this with these 3D armors just lying on the ground. And that is a 3D model. You can't tell me it's not a 3D model. I will not be owned again in the comments by people telling me, no, that was hand animated, actually. The thing you thought was 3D. That's happened many times, and it's really annoying me. Not that you're not annoying, but I'm annoyed that I'm getting fooled. Like, there is, like, a real level of attention paid. By the way, that was a little shot of, like, the starving beggar girl there during Flamme's monologue about, like hierarchy and power. Is like, that feels a little bit like a thing of, like, yeah, humans kind of do that too, right? Like, which, again, is the thing of, is the story also going to engage with the reverse of that? Like that humans, even if they're not quite as ontologically evil, like, not bound to that hierarchy in the same way that demons sort of are by their nature, like, maybe humans should also do a better job of, like, not treating things like a hierarchy. Maybe humans should do a better job of, like, treating one another as you know, equals or something, so that you don't get starving children on the street. Maybe that's a thing that we could do. But, like, look, like, this rising hill That's not. There's not really anything. It's just a hill that's meant to be like a dramatic framing point for these three characters. Look at that fucking lush ass, old growth plant life in this fucking shot. It's not really needed. Like they don't really need to do that for what the shot is, but let's see, what's the flower scene? Yeah, like, but like the backgrounds in this fucking show, man. Are like, just like you could click to any fucking point in this fucking anime and it's a wallpaper. Sorry, I'm just indulging myself here. Um, but yeah, like I have some nitpicks about the structure, but cool. Now we have established Frieren's power level. We have established that Fern and Stark can take on demons and win, even quite powerful demons. That then raises the question of what's the next challenge? Like, what's the next test of strength that these characters will have to overcome? Because especially for Stark, I'm interested to see like how, because I really do love the kid. That his flaw is like, it's not that he can't do it. It's not that he's actually weak. It's that he thinks he's weak. It's that he has this assumption in his own head about like where his level of strength is. That is wrong, right? Like, he doesn't have an accurate assessment of what he's actually capable of and how and whereas Fern, of course, has a 100% like pinpointed accurate with spreadsheets. Like, girl has charted that shit out. She knows exactly how powerful she is, and she's like sort of working on getting. I like the contrast between them in that way. So I wonder what the next test of strength is, especially for Stark, because he could have some really fun ones. Anyway, I think that was episode 10. Yeah. Let me look at the time. Yeah, you know what? I can watch episode 11 today also. Let me go record that. Bye.